Hi, Kelly. Can she see me? It's been a fantastic day so far. I'm sure everybody in the room feels as excited and inspired as I do. We've had some fantastic presentations about pushing boundaries in all sorts of different ways, lots of different links between the types of work that we've seen. And the next guest speaker that we're about to hear from is Kelley Knickerbocker, who you may or may not already know. You may know her work. I think a lot of people do. And just from a personal point of view, I'll just give you a little story of my own, because last July 2022, I took a trip to Seattle to do a course with Kelley. I built a little holiday around it, and on the morning, the first day of the course, I didn't feel well. Turned out I had COVID. So at 7:30, I phoned Kelley to let her know about it. And this just shows you the character of this woman. We'll find a solution. And she did. So Kelley set me up an isolation workspace, and she ensured that I fully took part in the whole week's course despite the COVID and despite those concrete steps, Kelley. So at the end of Kelley's presentation, which she has organised for us in advance, and we'll be playing the presentation, Kelley's with us via Zoom link, and you'll be able to ask some questions in the Q&A just as for the other presenters. So without any further ado, let me just introduce Kelley's talk, which is To Step, Stride or Leap, The Calculus of Boundary Pushing. Subtitle, Thoughts on Choosing Which Boundaries to Push in Our Mosaic Practice and When How to Push Them, from the standpoint of a self-described status quo fan admiring the hell out of all you gutsy rebels. Take it away, Kelley. Thank you.
Hello, BAMM members. Greetings from the States, from Washington State in particular, and my hometown of Seattle, where my studio and home are located. Thank you for inviting me to come and talk to you about the calculus of pushing boundaries. And I would have loved to have been there in person. That would have been wonderful to be actually speaking with you and making eye contact and feeling the energy in the room. But here we are. And thank you for the opportunity to think through this idea, this topic, and sort of put my head around it and push some boundaries myself in figuring out how to do this video thing. And thank you to all of you who are making this forum happen. And Tamara and Tracy and Lewis, thank you so much for your help to me in working this out. And I am so glad that BAMM is out there making community between mosaic makers, both in the UK and beyond. So, in thinking about boundaries, let's talk about what a boundary is. So a boundary is a line, a demarcation line, either real or imagined, between the known and the unknown, the here and the there, how things are, how things might be. So it's this limiter, this line in between the now and the then. There's so much, there's so many ways that boundaries raise their presence in our lives, and we're pushing them all the time, as we are all endeavoring to push the boundaries of our understanding of mosaic, our skills in mosaic, what community is in mosaic. So these are all things that we're contemplating, I know, all the time as we build our art practice, just let alone just the boundaries that need to be pushed within an art practice. So, and life in general. So life is full of boundaries and full of opportunities to either push them or not. And it's a bit ironic that that you're having me talk about pushing boundaries, because I am, I guess, what you would call an incrementalist. When we think of steps, strides, or leaps in pushing boundaries, I'm more of a stepper, not a leaper, generally. But in retrospect, I look and I think, wow, some big shifts have happened, but rarely were they quick. Rarely were they leaps. They were more like slow-mo leaps of many steps in between. So I just think that's a little bit funny, because in my practice, yes, I'm pushing some boundaries with materials and usage and that sort of thing. And that is all in a very sort of controlled environment, and lots of testing and lots of overthinking. I'm a cautious overthinker. So so I'm doing that all the time. But the cumulative is some pretty big leaps. So to go back about, 17 years or so, when I took the leap, in a way, of starting to make mosaic for a living, I was in a comfortable job I'd been in for 25 years, and it had meant a lot to me at the beginning and sort of growing up professionally there, and it had a lot going for it. It was comfortable, it was good pay, good benefits, and all of that. But it had lost the joy that I wanted to feel in what I was doing for a living each day. And so, but I didn't feel myself qualified to really do anything else. And so the other thing that I had, that I loved and that had been present with me all of my life, was creativity and various acts of making and exploring process. And so I had that, but no formal training in artwork. And so while it may have seemed the natural choice to push the boundary of comfort and good pay and reach for joy, which was on the other side of the boundary, I was very, very hesitant, because I didn't feel like, I'm not an artist. I'm a creative person, but I'm not an artist, and I have no idea how to do that. And what fool leaves a good job to go to out without a real, personal safety net to do that? And so for me, the leap was, in my mind, it was the imaginary boundary, to push the imaginary boundary of, I can't do that. So the mental shift between that's not something I can do or I'm qualified for, to, hey, maybe I could do that, because it is something I've loved all my life. Not mosaic. I had no exposure to mosaic, but to figure out how to incorporate art into a livelihood. Maybe I could do that. That was a big leap. And so after the leap of the idea and the intent came a lot of steps and a lot of incremental moving toward. But that initial mental shift gave me the confidence to give my notice at my job after only having made this one mosaic in mortar. Rather a nutty leap, huh? Can you imagine if you had been there in that moment? You would have been going, no! That is nothing to base a career on. Of course not. I didn't do anything crazy in that moment. I gave an entire year's notice at my place of employment, and did some other things I'll talk about in a minute. But let me just share with you a little bit of my philosophy of step thinking. I call it my flashlight beam philosophy. So when I am moving forward, I can see out in front of me just so far, perhaps as much as a flashlight beam, metaphorically speaking. I can see a little bit out in front of me. And I'm very observant. I'm looking at that that distance and I'm looking at what's there and I'm looking what's in front of me and I'm observing, I'm thinking about it, and I'm taking it in and adding it to my accumulation of knowledge that I already have to formulate a way forward. So I have taken in everything I've seen thus far and I'm using it to chart a course. So I take a step forward, whatever that is, and then the flashlight is illuminating a little bit more, which I take in, I observe, and I take in, and I add to my accumulated knowledge and understanding, and then I move forward again. And so this is my philosophy of how I work. And just as a funny aside, I'm married to a man who doesn't even recognize the flashlight. He just is all over and has all kinds of ideas and sees all the stuff, big picture thinker and not, no boxes, more visionary thinker. And I love that there are so many ways for us to be and so many ways for us to successfully move forward. And you own the one that you have. You own it and you use it and you move forward. So that's what I'm doing. And so in that class with Laurel True, as we built that piece and as I built that piece with a borrowed design because I couldn't come up with a design on the fly at that point and so nervous, and I built that was information I was taking in and I was seeing, I was moving, the flashlight beam was moving forward one step and I was seeing the possibilities. All of a sudden, I was having this lived experience of making a mosaic in mortar and realizing that all the different materials I could use, the unlimited nature of the making of mosaic. And it just sort of blew everything open for me. And I knew that I could be interested and delighted with this particular discipline for a really long time. And that was pivotal in my decision to then take the deep dive. And I went in full time from the moment I started. And, but it was that incremental, again, I'm an incrementalist. And so it's being very observant to what's happening in front of me, taking it in and seeing what it sparks. And I bring this into practice as well. But so to go back to the beginning there, where I was deciding to make this leap, mosaic felt safe to me because it was very technical, and I could approach it as a trade and not as an art because I did not think of myself as an artist. Another invisible barrier there, and it's sort of a imaginary boundary between what I thought I could do and what it was actually possible for me to do. And so I took it safe and thought, well, I'll do architectural mosaic because that technical stuff I can figure out. I can own that. And so I'll bring my lifetime of intuitive creativity with me and hope that that sort of sees me through until I can focus a bit on that and strengthen that. And the naivete. But somehow it's funny how our minds help us to sort of angle into to our destiny and figure out ways to get there. And so I began in architectural mosaic and I just began to do work for neighbors and friends, whoever would give me access to their stuff, to their house, to their stairs, to their windows, whatever. And so I want to show you an image of a fireplace that I did back then in those early days. So here is that. So I continued to move on in architectural mosaic in residential settings, and so commissions for clients, and enjoying that quite a lot, working in whatever materials they asked me to, on whatever substrate they wished, and really expanding my skills and my knowledge and understanding of the craft. In between those residential commissions, I was beginning to do a lot of decorative work, very colorful decorative work in stained glass, and approaching it mainly from a technical standpoint. Did not want to do flat stained glass mosaic. I wanted to build with glass on top of itself and stacked, working architecturally up, structurally, straight up and, sort of, yeah. So I was doing that and I was really enjoying it. And I wasn't thinking, oh, this is on my way to fine art. No, I was not thinking about that at all. I was just thinking about this is fascinating technical exploration. And working with color was joyful and fun. Not that I knew anything about color theory, but I was just having a good time and just exploring. And that was a wonderful groundwork for the rest of my practice, because it's all about exploration and saying what if and solving technical challenges. So I'm going to put an image here of some of that colorful work from those earlier days, just to show you how that was going. And it was good. It was a good time. But at some point, I realized that I was relying on color to do most of the heavy lifting of the communication of my mosaics. And mainly because I knew nothing about composition, design, value, balance, all the principles of art and design. Basically, I knew nothing. And so I decided to pull back on the crutch of color and remove it from my work for the foreseeable. And so for several years, I worked just in grayscale in order to hone my understanding of those different principles and really move into them, and also let the mosaic do the talking instead of color. Let the reason why a mosaic is mosaic do the talking. The dimensionality, the texture, those things about mosaic that are unique to this medium. And so just really sunk myself into that for several years, and then began bringing color back a little bit at a time. And so it was in that time of working achromatically for the most part that I made another shift. And that was the shift from working decoratively to working conceptually. And this is something that was in the back of my mind. This was a boundary, an imaginary one, that beyond that point, beyond the conceptual art line, are real artists. That's what makes someone an artist. And it seems silly in retrospect to characterize it that way, but hello brain, that's what they do. And so that was a limitation in my mind, that I did not have that. I did not have that gut level need to express an idea in mosaic, nor did I have any idea how that could happen. So I was invited to participate in an experimental show in 2013, and it was a site-responsive show to the building that was originally the immigration building, the main immigration building here in Seattle. So very checkered history. A lot of good things happened there. A whole lot of bad things happened there. And so when the building is all art studios now, but when you go there, you're struck by the energy and the history of the building hits you when you enter it. And there's no denying it when you walk in that building. And so we knew we had to make that show, responsive to the site. And I was terrified, had no idea how to do that. But I said, I'm game. I'll do it. I'll make a piece. I'll see what I can do. But don't put it in the show unless it's worthy. And Joe Braun and Kate Jessup, who were helping me, we were doing the show together. They said, don't worry, we won't put it in unless it's good. So, good friends, honest. So I had no idea what I was going to do. And one day I was working with a mortar slurry, a black mortar slurry, and I had overwatered it. And so there was a standing water on the top. And I, being lazy, I thought, oh man, I don't want to mix up a whole nother slurry. So maybe I can just what do you call it? Take that water off the top and use the schlock underneath it. And so I grabbed a white paper towel and I dabbed it into that standing water, that black standing water. And as I was watching that black move up through the white, I thought, wow, that is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And I also thought, wow, that really is like the process of immigration from one culture to another, or just the situational, one situation to another, the from here to there and leaving this and becoming this. And what about this is obliterated? And what about this is added? What can I keep from here and take into there? Does it all get obscured, or can I take it with me? So all these questions and all these dilemmas, and just the very idea of absorption, of sort of cultural absorption when transitioning into a new culture, it just hit me. Wow, this could be perfect for that show, but no idea how to make it happen. So weeks and weeks and weeks of testing and figuring out how to make paper towels into tesserae and adhere them to a surface. And the result, I'll show you an image here of the process of doing that. So there's some process photos of how that came to be. And then the final product was done, and it was successful, and it was wonderful, and it was a good, it was such a huge moment to realize that I had made that, I'd pushed through that boundary, and I had made a conceptual piece. And now I felt, own my title as artist. I could own that identity. And now I had another way of working. I had another way of understanding mosaic and expressing through mosaic. And it's actually assemblage, but a lot of the principles of mosaic underpin it. So I'm gonna give you a final image here, an image of the final piece, and just let you see what that is. It's the largest work I had done to that point, and it was like 1.5 meters high and 1 meter wide. And so that was a huge transition, a huge boundary crossing for me that changed my entire practice. Because now I could be sort of bilingual and work decoratively, work conceptually, work just from a material standpoint. There's so many ways I could work. And so then on to the next boundary that needed to be pushed, and that was ondimento. And when I had first come to mosaic, I thought, I didn't even know what ondimento was, had no idea. But when I did hear about it, when I did figure out what it was, I was all like, that's old. I want to be contemporary and original, and I don't want to be bogged down with all that classical stuff. And oh, the hubris. Oh my gosh. And so I ignored it for a long time. And then when I finally did begin to explore ondimento, it was like, oh man, forehead smack, because the very opposite of being limiting. I thought it would be limiting, and I thought it would be hard. And yes, it was hard for me. I sucked at it for a long time, and sometimes it is still hard. But I discovered that that instead of being limiting, it was actually freeing, because it gave me a new way to express, and it gave me all the principles that come underneath ondimento, and those improved every aspect of my work. So it was a boundary worth pushing through. Should have been earlier, but so I'm going to show you here a photo of some of my earlier ondimento attempts, and then an image of a more recent piece that is an ondimento that I'm quite happy with. But I'm so grateful to have learned that. So much growth from screwing up our courage to push a boundary and push through. It's nothing but growth. The end result can be sometimes a little painful, joyous, revealing, but it's always growth. And that's what we want to be doing in our practices, is growing our artistic person. So it's so worth doing. So let me just share with you one more sort of organic boundary cycle that involves my current work, which is drawing over the topography of a completed mosaic that has been, the tesserae have been faceted to expose an inner clay body or a stone body that is receptive to color and then also to drawing, and then drawing across the ondamento lines and around and through to create this layer of movement and connection across the mosaic. And so that began with, in 2015, for a very practical reason, I was faceting dark crockery, getting the dark glaze off so that the white clay body could show through, simply to provide a lighter value in the mosaic. So I'm going to show you a picture of that. So I was faceting for this practical reason, and it did what it was supposed to do. And I did that on a few pieces that year, and then I moved on to other experimentation and whatnot. And then in 2018, I returned to that technique and began actually coloring the exposed surface, simply because I had something I wanted to get across. I was looking at the facets and realizing that they had properties, and that one of those properties was absorption, and in many cases, and another one of those properties was that the glaze, it wasn't just glaze and then clay body. Usually faceting gave a cross section of the glaze, which has a texture then. And so it would hold coloration differently than the clay body. And of course, the coloration would come right off the glaze. So I began to experiment with that coloration, and did a few pieces with that. And then again, moved on to different things, and then circled around in 2020, 21, and realized that, hey, if that can take color, it could also take drawing. And I was also thinking about the idea that of understructure and then surface movement, and sort of culturally, how we have a different understructure sometimes than how we move about in the world. There are things that we hold on to, and we believe, and we embody underneath, that underpin how we work on the surface. So the relationship of those two things, they're not always coherent. So just playing around with that. So I started doing that, and that has led to my current work. And so I will give you a picture of the coloration, and then I will give you a photo of my current work that can sit up on the screen with the drawing and all that can sit up on the screen while we talk about, we summarize and sort of talk about our takeaways here from thinking about the different ways that there are to push boundaries. So wherever you are, whatever type of style that you have, you're a go-getter, run out there, make the decision, do the thing, no fear. Awesome. Go you. You are my hero. And I admire you. And I probably follow you on Instagram because I can't believe that you are that awesome. And I enjoy and I learn so much. I learn from your courage and your bravery. And there, the rest of us who are, stepping or striding toward our leaps of boundary pushing, realizing that all those leaps entail also steps and strides, and there will always be more boundaries to push. Life will just keep bringing them, and each one will teach us a little bit more about how much we can do and how it suits us, and whether that push will be aligned with who we are and what we want, and we'll be more aware of how we can do it and how we can enlist other people to assist us. If it's a group thing, we'll get braver. We'll get braver as we push each boundary. We'll know more. We'll understand more. We'll be progressing in our practices. And you may already be pushing boundaries and not even realize it. So take that rear view mirror look and check out where you have come and realize how many boundaries you have pushed, you are pushing right now to move forward in your understanding, your skill, all of that, and your choices in your life. So give yourself a whole lot of credit for how you are moving through, and you already have. Examine boundaries when you come up against them. as to whether they are real or imaginary and treat them accordingly. Because sometimes they may just be something you haven't thought of, you haven't realized that you can do, but hopefully as you look back on your already pushed boundaries, you'll realize that you do. That's an imaginary line, and you actually can step over it into the next stage, the next phase. And finally, just keep doing the next thing. Do the next thing. Be paying attention to how you're working, what you're doing, what is working, and what will carry you forward just naturally as you pursue the next thing. Oh, I wonder what if I were to, and do that thing in your practice, especially technically, and test and practice and try those things on, because they are going to light bulb new processes, new ideas, new adventures in boundary pushing. So that's it. That's what I've got for you. Thank you so much for hanging in there. And I've enjoyed being able to talk to you, and I will take some questions. I will be here live. And so ask me what you wish, and we'll have a conversation, which I'm just delighted. I'm delighted that we can have a conversation here. And thank you again. Thank you again so much for having me, for letting me talk at you for a half an hour. So, questions?
Okay. So, is this the real Kelley I can see on the screen live? Or is this the pre-recorded Kelley? I don't know. It's you. It's your real Kelley. Does anybody have a question? Alison.
Hi, hi Kelley. Your work's lovely. I would like to know, what do you use to draw on your mosaics, on the pieces? What do you draw with?
Well, it depends on what the surface is, whether it's absorbent or not, or whether it is like porcelain, not absorbent. It needs a different. So all kinds of things. It's not exactly a short answer. So I test and test and test with all kinds of things: acrylic, India ink, oil, all kinds of watercolor, all kinds of different substances. So it just really depends on the piece.
Thank you. Lorelei.
Hi, Kelley. I was just wondering whether there's a time when you've pushed a boundary and wished you hadn't.
That's a good one.
Well, not exactly, but one of them was the boundary of public art and doing public art. And I did that. I did a couple of public art. I screwed up my courage, and I applied for, and I got a couple of public art jobs. And after doing a couple of those, I realized I don't want to do that. So it's not that I regretted taking the leap. It's that actually the leap showed me that wasn't something that I wanted to do, work with committees and all of that. And I'm much more granular, and I think focused on the process. And so I learned that through pushing that boundary and doing a couple of those things. But as is true with most aspects of my life, I don't like pushing a boundary often. So I'm regretting it the whole time I'm doing it. But then afterwards, I have grown. I have grown in every way. And so I very rarely ever regret.
Have we got time for a few more? Oh, great.
Yes. It's not a silly question, but what is faceting? Are you scraping the surface of the ceramic off, or what does it mean?
Can you clarify that question? Can you repeat?
What is faceting? You used it in your work. What does it mean?
What is faceting? How do you facet an object?
Oh, what a good question. What a good, yes, I can do that. So yes, you're right in my wheelhouse. chipping off the surface. So whether it's the polish off of stone or the glaze off of ceramic, it's chipping it off either in smaller pieces with wheeled nippers or larger pieces with the hammer and hardy. Just like you've seen done on smalty, with the edges of large pieces of smalty being faceted with the hammer and hardy. That's what I'm doing. I'm just chipping off bits of that surface, and sometimes wholesale chipping off the surface in its entirety to get rid of all the glaze and just leave the clay body.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, well, any more? Tomorrow?
Hi Kelly. So you said that you didn't like working with committees, which I get, but are there any collaborations with individuals who might have taken you in a new direction or helped you push through some boundaries?
Yes, now collaborations, that's a whole nother story. I love doing that. I love that. Because again, it's more intimate. It's more, and yes, I am a mosaic whore. I will do anything with anybody as long as it's not public. And it increases my skills. So I have fabricated for other artists. I have, been a minion on other people's work, and it's been a joy. And I've done a collaboration with Annabella Woower in a residency in 2002. We built a piece together, and I've done collaborations with my studio mate, Todd Campbell, and learning to mesh, to bring our individuality to those projects and yet merge them, maintain that individuality and yet speak in conversation with one another. Absolutely. I love those and learn tons when we don't kill each other. Sometimes after we kill each other and we come back from that, it's amazing.
Okay. Oh, can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Yeah, so about the hard materials and pushing these traditionally hard materials vis-a-vis the unusual materials such as paper towels and tree bark, etc. Would you like to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I suppose that's a boundary pushing of traditional mosaic materials and just the tradition of hard materials that mosaic is. Similar to pushing the boundary of making space in mosaic, adding areas of empty space in mosaic, which traditionally mosaic has been, dense, cover the whole thing medium. And so adding those changes with intent and respect to the tradition, but bringing in, my work is a combination of assemblage and mosaic, really. And those ephemeral materials, I'm a firm believer in the value of contrast, and that the hard materials and that the traditional ornamento and the hard materials are even more what they are, and beautiful and eloquent when they are presented next to or in concert with, in conversation with ephemeral materials. And I do the best that I can to make them as stable as possible in that construction. But I love mixing those and allowing, and the conceptual conversation that is there, that mosaic, yes, has endured for thousands of years, and parts of that mosaic will endure for thousands of years. And yet the ephemeral materials to me represent the us, the human in that construction, because we are not going to be around that long. We are going to fade. We are going to disintegrate, and there's something beautiful about that ephemera as well. And so the two of those together, yeah, I'm all for it. Yeah, let's do it.
So you're embracing the temporary and the permanent.
Absolutely.
Play against each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that lead to any other questions? How are we doing for questions? Time. Done. Good. Kelley, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so very much for your presentation. Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you, Tracy.
See you again.